life. So there are things you miss. When, if you've been with me for a few weeks, you've figured out that I'm really good at this. In the business of media, they talk about the talent, the people in front of the camera, and the tech, the people behind the cam. I'm not so good at the front part, and I'm not so good at the back part. You put the two things together, and you get kind of an amplification of a problem. But I think we're doing a little better today. Life is a real problem in the life of the church. I've talked about this, that we're not getting the job done in the life of the church, no matter how much we've tried. And I think we got to get back to basics. But first, I want to share a couple of things with you. By the time I'm done, I think I'm going to take it a little further than E.V. Bruce did in writing the book. And I hope you'll stay with me for the whole episode today. And honestly, I'm just looking at the stuff I've got that I want to say. I got to edit and keep things out, or else it'll be over an hour, and I don't want to do that. I want to keep it less than a half an hour, closer to 20 minutes if I possibly can. That I think will be enough so that you'll feel like you're drinking from a fire hose, and I hope it'll be enough that'll help you to put some feet on the ground in action. Yeah, I see life as a four-tier fountain. The lower layer in the fountain is the laboring years. If we divide life roughly into 4 quarters, you can think in terms of 20 years, 25 years, whatever you want to think of as quarter, the learning years. Then on top of that are the laboring years. And then we've got the leading years. And finally, we've got the legacy years up to 2. And we developed a habit over the last 100 years in our society of throwing away the people in the legacy years, saying, now they're old school, they don't know. Living in today. And there is some value in saying that, because sometimes us people in the legacy years have not been in tune with what's actually happening in the world. And we like to say, well, back in my day, well, it isn't your day. It isn't the old days. It's a new day, and we have to learn how to deal with it properly. I want to encourage you in the days that you have to make sure that you understand where you are in the process. And don't think that when you're in the laboring years, as so many people do, that you actually know how to lead, because you're going to have to learn the hard way to move it up a notch. And don't think that when you're in the leading years that you can't learn some things from people in the legacy. Well, that's the introduction. I want to get going on the training of the 12. We're in chapter 4. And this is where the chapter where Jesus actually chooses the 12 disciples that we know as obviously the 12 apostles. So I'm going to try and go through Bruce very quickly with a PowerPoint presentation that I think faithfully outlines what Bruce was saying. And at the end, we're going to get to the practical, and I think I'm going to say some things that you may never have heard before, and I hadn't heard them early enough in my life. So here we go. First of all, as we look at the training of the 12, there are the 12 disciples who Bruce says moved from being disciples to being apostles. I'm not sure I like that distinction, but that's the way he does it. He says that the ministry of Jesus was in 2 phases. The first period, with Jesus doing his thing by himself and teaching basic concepts. And then the second period where he had selected the 12 out of the group of people, a larger group of people that were following him. And he had the 12 that were specially engaged with him so that he could deal with them on a public basis and on a private basis. The things that they were supposed to do, they had to be the students of the whole thing. Now, bear in mind, these were uneducated people, uneducated in terms of the formal theological educational schools of the day. It doesn't take formal education to do ministry and to do it effectively, apparently, because that's the way Jesus dealt with it. They were to become the co-workers in spreading the kingdom of God. We speak in terms of the church, but kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven are the terms that are used much more often in the Bible than church. And we need to think of this rulership of God ultimately and perfectly in the hereafter, but in the here and now, the kingdom of God, doing what Jesus wanted us to do after his departure. Okay, now I want you to bear in mind these 4 things that and Bruce defines this in his chapter 4 of his book. They were trained through their daily interaction, their regular interaction with Jesus, about their character, about what to do, their actions, about what to believe, and how they would demonstrate they put their trust in Jesus, and what they were to teach to others. People are complaining today about artificial intelligence taking over the world. I love what's happening in artificial intelligence. It's not perfect by any means, but that which it would take me 10 hours to do back in the day when I've had commentaries all over my desk and given away all my commentaries, well, not all, but most. And, I'd have to look what this guy says and what that guy says. And I can do in less than an hour what it would take me the better part of a week. And what that means is that I can prepare a better sermon today in less time than I could back in the day. And that gives me more time to do what Jesus wanted me to do. What did he want me to do? He wanted me to teach other people, a finite group of people, what to be, what to do, what to believe, and what to teach. Now, they were chosen at least a year before his final year, probably within the first year of his ministry, in my opinion, but not all at once at the beginning of his ministry. There's some evidence as to where that fits. It's detail that you do care about it, but I don't care to give it to you today. Why did he choose 12? Interestingly, I don't think that you can deal with 12 people. I just don't. I don't think that I can. I picked the number 4 just because it's convenient. I don't think that any of us can deal with 12 or more people, and some of us try. And if we do, we spread ourselves too thin, and the soup is so thin that nobody wants to drink it, and it's not moving us forward. I think that's where we've made some mistakes. There was some symbolism involved in that, and Jesus talked about that. That these 12 apostles, he renamed them. And the way you name things is very important in life, and you have to name yourself. It's part of your identity as to who you are, and find words that convey your particular role in life. And in this case, Jesus has already told these 12, 5 of them fishermen, or for sure, probably 5 fishermen. Let's collect. Terrorist, probably Simon the Zealot. He's telling them they're going to rule over the 12 tribes of Israel. I mean, these were Jewish people who kind of bowed the knees to the history. And Jesus says, no, you're going to be in front of them. So Bruce divides, and I think legitimately, the disciples into apostles into 3 different groups. And we don't know much about most of them. We do know some things about these 4, the first group, Peter, James, and John, Andrew. Although we don't know much about Andrew. We just know that Andrew was the one who got Peter, and that's so important. You might be the Andrew, not the Peter. That's okay. But if you give your life to finding the next Peter, then you make a huge difference in your life. I just jumped forward. Shouldn't have done that. Okay, so now we've got the next group, the middle group. The group included Philip and Bartholomew, probably Nathaniel. That's the way he's described by John. Thomas, who's seen as a melancholy, oh bother, I'll go and die with him. I don't think Thomas was all that negative. And there's evidence that Thomas got to the shores of India with the gospel. I think it's incredible. And then we've got Matthew, the outcast. We talked about him last week. Go listen to the story about why would Jesus ever choose that tax collector? There's reasons. Go look them up. And then we have this third group, James the Lesser. Don't know hardly anything about Thaddeus, other Judas. We don't know much about him at all. Simon the Zealot, he was a zealot, or basically a terrorist. And Judas Iscariot, few things about him. Not so good. He took care of the money, and maybe he aimed it off the top. Why did Jesus pick these 12? We don't know, but what we do know is that when he picked these 12, he was very deliberate. And all of them have a characteristic that is outstanding in a sense that they weren't that special. They were just ordinary people, just like you. Ordinary people that Jesus wanted to use in it. And he did. They started the movement that would change the world by the power of the Holy Spirit. Just by the human endeavor, but by what the Spirit of God had injected into their personalities, imperfect though they were. And they did a great deal getting things started, and much of it followed up by the Apostle Paul. So, you want to be like Jesus? Well, okay. Look, I don't even know what that means for most people. I think they think gentle, meek, and was loving, the warm, fuzzy parts, which were all true. But there were two directions in Jesus' ministry, and you got to think about both of them. Particularly if you're employed in it or have a primary leadership. You've got the public part, what people see up there, but you've got the personal impact part. What happens when you're sitting down with your feet up, maybe on the bench in the coffee shop, just chewing the fat, just gabbing with the people who you're trying to get to follow you. You've got to understand this. They are watching you. Those people you want to follow you are already watching you. People are criticizing you. I don't like being criticized. Nobody likes being criticized. When they're gossiping, they're talking behind my back. Get over it. They are going to talk behind your back, and that's not all that bad. They need to analyze and figure things out. And in the life of the church, particularly if you're employed in the ministry, you've got to get the kind of balance that's needed in the ministry. Now, Bruce doesn't talk about these particular things I'm talking about, but so what? But I think they follow from what we've covered before. Wife's, the way I think of it, the wife am, if you like. Worship, instruction, fellowship, evangelism, service, or ministry. If you take a look at your day and hour by hour, what are you doing to serve Jesus, being like him in some way? You've got to get a good balance in here. And the thing that happens more often than not is this is whiffs. There's no E. And in the life of most pastors, there's no E. And the people notice that there's no E. They notice he's not a man of prayer. Now, I'm not particularly keen on the idea of the pastor being involved in a pre-service prayer meeting as people gather or having a pre-service prayer meeting. Your prayers aren't going to wear off if they for the meeting. By all means, pray about it. And for sure, you pray together about it, but be where the people are. Start the relationships. Be and talk with your 12. I've been fiddling with AI recently, and I've done some asking in various platforms. DeepSeek, he's the one that just released this week, and I worked on it and worked on Meta. I think Meta gave me better information on Meta.ai, gave me better information here than ChatGPT did. Or Claude.ai. Those are the four that I don't find. I get quick answers out of Google's Gemini, but I don't pay for the expensive. I'm impressed. But that's just my opinion, so you pick your own thing. I was looking at one of the conversations that Jesus had with people in the Gospels, and I've forgotten the number. I think it's 30 or 31, but one of the platforms. But then I came up with less than that. You know? All the same, and it's worth checking different sources. But the overwhelming majority of conversations that happened, according to this more extensive thing, was Jesus initiated. He started it. And we could look at I hadn't done the analysis, but you can do it very quickly. If you go to deepseek.com and sign up for an account, you can ask it to do this. According to the Bible, when Jesus initiated a conversation with somebody, how often was it a conversation with person was a believer, and how often with an unbeliever? I'm not asking that question. You take a long time to go and find that out, but artificial intelligence will get it for you real quick. I think maybe do that after I finish this program today. You gotta put time in with the 12th. Wear out your shoes before you wear out your computer chair from behind it. Now, when you're in the legacy years, it's a lot harder to do that, but it's a lot more important that you pass it on to those in the leadership years who ought to be setting the example and pressing those who are in the laboring years to do even more of the work out there. And they will learn as they go. So I think it's very important, and the so what, that you do that. Now, you say you want to be like Jesus? Well, I do too. And I'm working on it. And I feel like so far to go, I got to live another 100 years. I would love to live to be 100 years. I'm 80 now, and got 2 decades to go. It's pretty scary. I've lived in this house and been in this room for 18 years, and I've got only less than that to go. I went through one of those online survey things that analyzes my lifestyle. How old are you? Are you male or female? Do you smoke? And all those questions. And it said I'd live to 90.74. Well, I'm good with that number, but I'd really be 100 if I've still got more to contribute in it. And I want to be contributing up until the last moment. But I think that you learn from Jesus that you worked with a few. He spent more time working with those 12 than he spent with the mass crowds. And we like the big stories. Eating with 5,000 this morning, they're magnificent. Wedding at Cana touched on that, where other people are like, and the disciples got to watch how Jesus acted and therefore learn how to act in the crowd, with the crowd, and interacting with the crowd, interacting with Pharisees and the negative input that they had. They're like, find a few to work with. Walk and talk and drive, boat ride and plane ride. Do whatever you need to do to be with them. When Jesus chose his 12, and Mark tells us that he chose 12 out of the group of disciples that were following him to be with him and to send them out to preach and do miracles. But first of all, to be with him. You've got to pick your people to be with and expect those people to grow. Expect the thing to be a moving river in your life with people coming and going, but expect them to become people who are reproducers. If they're not giving evidence that they want to reproduce, don't throw them away, but distance yourself from them in terms of the amount of, I think, 24 people. So, let them respond to them every time they get in touch with you, but move away from intense involvement. Now, what are you going to do? Well, I suggest the number 4, pick it. And I suggest a period of 3 years because I think that's reasonable. Be longer. I don't think less. And this we had earlier on an earlier slide. What happened with these disciples? This is Bruce's. Well, he categorized it as these 4 things. Taught them about character. Doing what you said you were going to do when you said you were going to do it. They had over and over again. And people say, well, they should do this and that. These young guys in the laboring years and the learning years, they could drive me nuts because they know what the other guys should do. They're not doing it themselves. And it's so important that you teach them to be active, to put your feet on the ground. Now, what's going to happen when you work with people and you start to hit them a little hard, hit them hard all the time? They're going to turn on you, and sometimes you got to let them go because Jesus said, you don't throw your pearls in front of pigs. They don't appreciate it. They're going to eat you up. So, sometimes when you kick people hard, they're not going to like it. They're going to say, you don't love me anymore. Yeah, well, that's their fault. And they're going to find out, they're going to point out your flaws or invent flaws that you have to spread and talk about with others. It happens with all of them. It used to get over it. Okay, so you got to know what these 4 things are that you're passing on. But see my little arrow, double-ended arrow at the top, you went backwards and forwards. In a 3-year period, think in terms of that. It'd be much longer than that. You work with 4 people, but that doesn't mean you only work with 4 people for a lifetime. What it means is that as one comes in, you see the second arrow across there, well, as soon as you add one, you're going to have to subtract one. It's not like you're going to say, go away, but it is going to be that you're going to be less engaged with them. But when you talk with them, you might not talk with them for years. And you come back and you see them and you sit down together and you maybe have a meal together, whatever. You pick up where you left off and time goes by so quickly because you have an understanding of each other's personalities and gifts and perspectives. and you can learn from each other and they become more like a colleague. That's the wonderful part of it. You have a whole library of old relationships with people that go way back. I got people right now that I met in Bible college over 50 years, and it made a huge difference in me then to have those friends. But I didn't know when I was playing ping pong every Friday night with a friend. I'd still be in touch with him today. He reads my books, read his books. Never knew we were going to write books. We were just young people trying to figure it out. But over time, if you find a few and drill down deep with a few, yes, doing things in public, yes, for the whole crowd, but just primarily that individual area with a few, it makes a huge difference. Now, I'm going to suggest to you, I didn't know that. Nobody taught me that. And as I look back on my life, particularly when I was started in those labor years, I had some people viciously stay alone, was waiting the whole life, but even next day can see in the Trinity. I'm joking, I'm just joking, really. I have a little lesson that I can think of off the top of my head of people I learned from. I learned a tremendous amount, but I learned it in the public. They didn't invest in me privately and say, Gary, you need to brush up on this, that, or the other. I had very few conversations, not initiated by them. I had some that, if I initiated it, it made a difference. But I didn't initiate often enough because I didn't know I should. And they didn't invest because I thought, well, they're to rule me. And I didn't take the time to say, I want to spend time with you. And they didn't take the time to say that with you personally. I want you to come with me on this difficult conversation that I have to have. Maybe in taking a trip in the car for a couple of hours. Do you want to go a couple of hours and come and be with them? But make that an intentional time with those people. Talk about things that matter. Share your heart. Move forward and make. These are the things that we need to be doing. And I hope that you will this day consider who you can pick up. 1, 2, 3, or 4 people, just one at a time. Add them in. And if you don't have anybody, then ask the Lord to give you somebody new, perhaps. You're not leading if nobody's following. And if you think you're leading and you're just kind of out there, you're just going for a walk. If in fact you don't have anybody following you, but you don't need a whole tribe. Jesus picked. He was the perfect son. Forget the one who wipe out a few of the others we don't make. But he was training 12. Then he went aside. You can't buy this. It's not in print. I'm going to reprint it for you. Won't be this long because NB won't. By the end of the year, I'm going through it one piece at a time. And what Breakthrough Pathways is trying to do is what we're doing here in this part, is starting with leaders, trying to get them to notice people down here. Now, what we've got going on in our world is when our children grow up and they leave the church, and they might have been quite engaged in the life of the church and the programs, they leave and they go off to college. 50% of the time, they drop out of church, drop out of a relationship with God, and marry somebody who's inappropriate, and they head their life into the life of a world of hurt. Sometimes it happens with our own children. Apology. But make sure that as you're providing leadership in the life of the church, kind of at the time, that you're paying attention. Those wayward teenagers who you think, well, they know. Invest in. Find a few that you spend some time with. I don't know if it be weekly or monthly or whatever, but regularly for a few years, so that when they go off to college, they pick up what you've got, pass on to the others. Now, many of the others that they'll run into will be deficient as well, and they need to find a good spouse who's with them at the same level, and that's why I highly recommend people who go to Bible college, if for nothing else, to a spouse. So important. We pass on what we've learned. There's so many things you could do and ought to do that make a big difference in life of the church. Well, how much time I got there? Well, so we're going to come back with more. And next week we get into chapter 5, and we'll talk about that next week. Thanks for being here. Now, look, one of the things that you can do is pass these lessons. Thank you so much for those of you who have. I see it in the results that we've got some more subscribers and more views this week than we had last week. It keeps growing at that rate. By the end of the year, I'm not joking, it'll be thousands, but you've got to pass it on. So please, won't you do that? Even now, it'll be just live for you recorded, I think. I expect. On YouTube right now, you can just go take that link and say, hey, I just watched this. This is really, really something I needed to think about, and I apologize to you for not thinking about it later, but you'll have to hear the lesson. You like apology. Okay, here we go. Now I shift this thing off. All right, I got it off. Yes. Stop streaming right there. It's right there in front of me. It's a button there. Okay. Sounds good. God bless you. We'll see you next